Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1988 horror movie, 976 Evil. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. Link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, 976 Evil is one of those movies that I did watch over a decade ago, and I remember it being watchable, but nothing really that special. But after the more recent viewing, I enjoyed this a lot more than I initially thought I would going in. I'm not going to say that this is some kind of classic of the horror genre or it's a great movie, but I will say this, I do feel it's a little bit underrated, especially when it comes to horror films from the late 80s. The late 80s is when the genre started to become a little tiresome in a lot of different ways. I'm not saying that there aren't great horror films from that particular part of the 80s. I mean, the Blob remake, and there's other ones that come to mind. But you can tell that there was kind of a burnout sort of moment that was going on with the genre, in particular the slasher genre. And 976 Evil is, in a lot of ways, definitely trying to tap into that slasher genre popularity, but it does it in a way where it's not your typical slasher. It's really not a slasher at all. It's closer to something like Evil Speak or some of these other movies where someone is corrupted by evil. Now, the film is directed by Robert Englund. Yes, Freddy Krueger himself. And this was his directorial debut. And that's one of the most impressive things about 976 Evil is the film's direction. I was really blown away by Robert Englund's efficient direction in this film, especially when it comes to scenes that are supposed to evoke a certain eerie atmosphere or mood, or the scenes that dealt with a lot of practical or visual effects. Robert Englund is definitely somebody, or still is to this day. He's someone that is no stranger to the realm of special effects, whether it's makeup or visual effects. It's something that he's definitely very familiar with as Freddy Krueger, as the headliner in a franchise that is full of unique and complicated effect sequences. So I think he definitely did pick up some things from other directors that he worked with in the past and use those tools and those tricks that he learned to really good lengths for a relatively low budget horror movie. It looks really good. I think Robert Englund also did a good job working with lighting in particular. This film just has a nice, slick, stylish look and feel to it. And when it comes to scenes that are even just straight up absurd, like the fish falling from the sky, or some of the other moments throughout the movie, the direction also still has a pretty consistent tone visually. So there aren't a lot of moments where Englund's direction is too off kilter or too out there. And I think that definitely does help the movie visually have a certain pace to it, and makes it so it's not uneven. And he used a lot of different techniques, a lot of different pans and zooms and different angles it was a really fairly ambitious directorial effort from a guy who had never directed a feature film before. But I think it definitely did help that Englund had been in the horror industry and been a part of the genre and done so much horror genre filmmaking when it comes to being the man in front of the camera and working with all these different directors like Wes Craven and so on, that I think he was in a better place than some other actors turned directors, for instance. So it seemed like it was something that wasn't really that bumpy of a transition for him. And that's what makes it so puzzling to me that this didn't lead to him getting more directing jobs. Other than, I think, Killer Pad, I think that's what it's called, Robert Englund didn't really do a lot of other movies. And he showed he was definitely capable of being a solid director with this film. So I don't quite get why Englund didn't go on to have more choices for films later on. But then again, he might have, and he just decided not to do it because he decided just to do other things with his career, and that's understandable as well. And then you have a screenplay by Rhett Topham and Brian Hedgeland. Now, Brian Hedgeland, prior to this, he actually worked on Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, and afterwards he did Highway to Hell. And he would go on to really make a name for himself with LA Confidential, a film that he wound up winning an Oscar for when it comes to Best Screenplay. So you can tell that Brian Hedgeland is a rising star, but it's still one of those things where this script is not the best. And by rising star, I mean you can tell that he has talent, and he's definitely getting there. And it's something that people should definitely keep an eye on, especially when it comes to his work in Nightmare 4, which was his first script, and also some of his work here. But there's still a lot of growing pains going on here when it comes to his screenwriting. And one of those things is maintaining a consistent tone. While the film has a consistent tone visually, thanks to Robert Englund and the cinematographer, when it comes to its narrative, when it comes to a lot of other aspects of the script, it's not able to maintain a consistent tone throughout. And that's one of the reasons why it isn't as good of a film to me as it could be. Because there are moments where it's too silly or it's too over the top to take that seriously, let alone find scary. And then there's other stuff where it's trying to be more dramatic, more down to earth. And those elements don't really work as well as they could either because of this uneven tone. You've got the titular, the main lead, possessed villainous hoax who is on the marketing and the poster, played by Stephen Geoffreys, and he's making quips like he's a discount Freddy Krueger. So it's like one of those things where it's tongue-in-cheek, but then there are moments where it's trying to also be somewhat weighty when it comes to its drama, like the abusive relationship with Hoax and his mother, and the whole subtext involving religion and religious paranoia, and the climax that is supposed to involve a very heartwarming, heartfelt, and just sad scene where Spike, who is Hoax's friend and cousin, he has to essentially let his cousin go because he's gone too far to the dark side. And it's one of those things where in a better script that's more consistent when it comes to its tone, that sequence would have more impact. But the way that it's set up, it's very fleeting and doesn't really register as strongly as I think it honestly should have. And there are some other issues. For instance, the character of Spike, which I think is actually written fairly well, in terms of the character definitely has an attitude, but he's written in a way where he's not a total jerk. He's definitely rough around the edges, a little rough and tumble, but he's not a total jerk off. And so there are endearing qualities to him, and it makes it so this is a character you root for and you like, a little bit more even than Hoax. And for some reason, the script decides to just completely forget about him for way too much of the running time. And it doesn't matter what version of the film you watch. You can watch the extended version or the theatrical cut. It still forgets about Spike for way too much of the running time. And it's interesting because it doesn't really feel like a film that's essentially focusing on Hoax initially. It's actually focusing more on Spike, so it makes you think that Spike is the main character, because he's the one that makes the phone call initially to the horoscope service. He's the one that starts getting the calls. He's the one that starts getting tempted by the devil, so to speak, until he decides to go on a different path. And then it shifts gears and it focuses more on Hoax and how he's corrupted by the horoscope, a phone service, and the devil, Mr. Dark, and how he's given the powers and then he uses them to get revenge on his bullies and so on. And I get that, but I think they should have focused on Hoax even more initially early on and then brought in Spike later, instead of trying to do this whole Spike seems like he's the main character, but then he's actually not, and it's really more Hoax's story. I do find it interesting that the script doesn't really have your typical sort of love interest sort of thing going on, whether it's between Spike and another girl or it's between Hoax and another gal. Like Hoax, there is this whole thing with him and Spike's ex, and there are some sweet moments there, but that's very it's a very small part of the script, because after that it just turns into a moment of genuine tragedy where Hoax initially makes his deal with the devil and sets up the pentagram and everything and just wants to scare her, but then it turns out that in doing so she winds up dying. So he just wants to scare her with some spiders in her TV dinner, but it turns out to be something much more than that, and it turns into a total devastating tragedy. And I do feel that that's an interesting place to take a love interest sort of angle, because in a lot of films they would just carry that on all the way to the end credits. This is not one of those movies. It's the one time there's a bit of a potential love interest where Hoax and this girl are sharing time with one another and seems like they're actually forming a bond. It's then completely broken up because Hoax's bullies show up and start messing with him and messing with the girl. And the girl then also finds out that Hoax was not necessarily telling the truth on his end, and he's not the best person. So then she's upset at him, and that's what makes him want to scare her, but he didn't want to kill her. But then after he kills her, then that just makes it so he's even more corruptible by this evil. And that's why I feel the script, if it had a better tone, if the character of Hoax was written in a way where he's a little bit more likable and sympathetic, then I think his turn would be more powerful. As it is, you kind of feel for him, but then you're kind of like, well, this guy's a perv. He's a creep. He stole her panties. Like, it's that kind of, it's like, he's a perv, he's a creeper anyway. So it's that kind of awkward thing where you're like, I don't really feel that bad for him, unlike someone like um I can't believe I forgot his name. I'm a total shitter for forgetting that character's name. Unlike Keith Gordon in Christine, where I think it's Arnie, you actually feel for him because he seemed like a regular guy. He wasn't a creeper. He wasn't a pervert. And when he got corrupted by the evil of Christine, that was genuinely heartbreaking. The stuff that goes on here with Hoax is not anything remotely close to that because he's a perv. He's a pervert. Um, Speaking of bullies, I also would like to point out the bullies. I think the script did a good job having these bullies be effectively menacing, but at the same time, uh, different than kind of your normal sort of bullies in terms of the different dynamics between the group. I thought it was a really cool, inspired choice by having them have these card games where they're making bets in the projection booth in a movie theater. I thought that was very interesting, and that enabled the film to have a lot of, oh, look at that movie poster, or look at that poster on the wall. It's for Fright Night, the movie that Stephen Geoffreys was also in. Um, and it is hard to escape the Evil Ed sort of comparisons because you could definitely tell that the writer had Evil Ed in mind, so it's a similar kind of character. And Evil Ed, I will say, was probably more likable though than Hoax. And the 976 Evil part of it, I thought was clever. I thought it was a clever idea to take one of those pay horoscope phone number scams and turn it into something horrific. I thought that was a fun idea. And I thought for the most part it was executed pretty well. I mean, from the opening scene, some poor soul calls the number and the payphone obliterates his ass. It's like, holy shit. All right. I'm in. And in a lot of ways, this film felt, from a narrative standpoint, like a extended feature-length episode of Tales from the Dark Side. And I love that show. So that whole vibe, that whole feel was just a part of this film's charm for me. The ending, though, the ending's a bit clunky. Also, the stuff involving Hoax when he turns and he's got demonic powers, it's not as satisfying as it could have been. Maybe because of the budget. But also I think the script doesn't really have as much creativity as I think it could have. Like there's a bit where he like rips out some hearts and puts them on the table. Would you like a pair of hearts? All I've got is a pair of hearts or something like that. And there's a few other moments that are effectively gruesome, but it still feels pretty tame. So I don't know if that was the censors or the MPAA or something, but it doesn't really feel like the violence or the gore is as visceral as I think it could have been. I would say the most intense, like, violent scene is when Hoax claws this one bully's face. Other than that, like, you have like the aftermath stuff where people show up dead, or when Hoax has the two beating hearts in his hand. But there's really not a lot of gore in this, so I think that's a little bit disappointing, especially for this time period. I mean, comparing this to something like the Blob remake is completely, totally unfair. But they came out the same year, and the Blob remake is gory and visceral and intense. And this, it does. It feels very tame and very safe for the most part. I mean, some blood in a toilet, like, it's just... It's a little disappointing in that regard. And the climax, I like the idea of Hoax's house turning into hell frozen over, and I think that was fun. Although I don't think it worked at all to have the baby, the not babysitter. That's a whole other kind of movie. I think she was like the principal, the school or whatever. I don't think it was a good idea to have her in that scene. I know that in the extended version, it makes more sense because there are other scenes where she's talking with the PI guy, which that's another thing that I thought was completely worthless. Cut out the PI guy stuff and just have Spike doing the investigating. Why did we need this guy? The scenes that he was in just made the film drag. And the principal gal, there's a scene where she's in Hoax's house. It's all covered in ice. And even if you have the context that she's not just a random character that now just has a fair amount of screen time, like in the theatrical version, which is the version that I watched, even if you have that context, the scene still suffers because she's so stupid. She's instantly should realize that this is not normal. The house is completely frozen over, and it's literally hell has frozen over, and she hears Hoax ask for help, and she doesn't think that it's a bunch of bullshit and it's a trick, and she's doing the typical horror cliche stuff where characters are just mind-numbingly dumb, where she'll let go into a room and ask if anybody's there, that kind of stuff. You're just like, what is this? That whole scene to me was a missed opportunity because it was a cool idea, but you should have had Spike in there earlier. You should have had some more stuff involving the ice. Maybe some ice flying around or icicles flying at people. I mean, you had a little bit of that with the ice bridge falling, and then the characters jumping to the other side. But I saw more stuff going on in Poltergeist 3 or in other sequences in other films that dealt with like the ice room. It was a little bit of a letdown. I mean, Amityville 3D had a better scene involving an ice room than this. Especially when a good chunk of it is just this principal lady who's just acting like a total dumbass, doing dumb things just for the sake of trying to build suspense, but it's never effective because I don't really give a shit about this character. And even if I did see the extra scenes with her, I still wouldn't give a shit because I just want to see Spike. I want to see more of Spike. And that when he finally does show up, it's too little too late. And then you have that whole scene where he's talking to Hoax and gets him to snap out of it, talking about going on a ride with him across the country. And it's supposed to be this somber, sad scene. But even that's kind of clunky because of the way that it's shot and it's set up. Like, I guess it's supposed to be Spike lets Spike go into hell because that's the only way to stop this hell freezing over apocalypse of some kind. And the way that it's shot on film or the way the effect looks, it looks laughable. And then on top of that, I don't know whether or not he let Spike go. Or whether or not Spike he didn't let himself go. Whether or not he let Hoax go, or he just threw him in the pit. It just felt kind of clunky. And then of course you had the whole stuff with the PI guy and the principal trying to escape on the power line, and I'm like, I don't give a shit because I don't care about these characters. But the script, it's fine. It's good enough. I would have liked a better tone. The stuff with Hoax's mom doesn't always work. I get what they're trying to go for with the raining fish, but it was still a little too out there, even for this kind of movie. And I didn't know whether or not I was supposed to laugh at the mother character. Like, was she supposed to be comic relief, or was she supposed to be someone that was abusive? Like it seemed like it was trying to do both, and that's just a really weird kind of blend of things to put together. Um, and of course, the film ends with more sequel bait sort of stuff, like, oh, the answering machine, or not the answering machine, the horoscope is still active, and who's going to be the next victim. But yeah, 976 Evil, the script it's decent. It's definitely at least average, at times above average, but it's not great for the reasons that I mentioned. The film features an alright cast. I mean, Stephen Geoffreys is Hoax. It was fun to see him get a pretty big role in a movie. And it's not like he hasn't had big roles in other movies like Fraternity Vacation, but here it felt like it was his time to shine. It was his vehicle, and I thought he carried things rather well. You could definitely tell that he had a lot of fun when he's in the demon makeup and killing people and trying to do his best to honor the film's director, Robert Englund. Um, Patrick O'Brien, I loved his performance as Spike. I really liked this character. I really enjoyed the performance. He had a lot of charisma and personality and charm to him, and good chemistry with Stephen Geoffreys and other members of the cast, like Lezlie Deane. Lezlie Deane, I also really enjoyed. She was not only sexy and hot, but she also had her own charisma. So she wasn't just a flat ironing board that looked good. Jim Metzler, I think, I think that character, I think Jim Metzler plays Marty Palmer. Yeah, I think he's the PI guy. I could be wrong though. Sandy Dennis, she plays the mother, Lucy, and she's obsessed with religion, and she's in a lot of ways kind of batshit crazy. I know a lot of people aren't really a fan of her performance, and I can get it because it is kind of obnoxious. But I liked her performance. I liked her take on this character. I wouldn't want this character to be portrayed in a way that was playing it straight. This is a character that needed to be portrayed in a hammy, over the top fashion, and I think Sandy Dennis definitely did pull that off. J.J. Cohen, he's in this as one of the bullies. You also have Darren E. Burroughs as one of the bullies. Jim Thibod. Robert Picardo, he's in this as Mark Dark, who is the man who's behind the 976 Evil phone service, and it's essentially insinuated that he's the devil. But yeah, the cast, it's fine. It's decent enough. The film also features some nice looking cinematography by Paul Elliott, which is very noticeable when it comes to sequences that take place in a dark, creepy alley or inside the ice covered house in the climax or in some of the other moments in the movie. The editing by Stephen R. Myers, it's nothing spectacular or stupendous, but it's still rather solid. It's good. There aren't a lot of moments where the editing is too choppy or too jarring. The music by Thomas Chase and Steve Rucker, there's like a couple bits of the main theme that I found to be pretty good, but there's a lot of stuff that's just very forgettable and just generic sounding. So it's not really one of the best scores. I think that probably would have elevated the film a little bit too if it had a better score that's more memorable overall, or fun music tracks by different bands or artists. That felt like something that was missing from this kind of movie, that's for sure. And like I said, the film, it doesn't necessarily deliver that much when it comes to the gore. So if you're looking into this for like gore, it's not really that gory of a movie. There's some, a face gets slashed, hearts get ripped out, but you don't actually see them get ripped out. There are some severed limbs and other sort of bloodletting, but in comparison to other films from this decade, it's very weak when it comes to the gore quotient. I did like the makeup effects, though, especially the design of Hoax when he gets more and more possessed and infected by the evil of Mark Dark and his phone service. I like how it had a lot of variety to it when it comes to the different stages. And there are some moments, though, where you can tell that he's just wearing gloves with the razors on them, which kind of takes you out of it at times. I think the makeup artists or whoever did the costume design or whoever did whatever, they could have done a little bit better job covering that up so it isn't as noticeable that it's just him wearing rubber gloves. Well, it's not technically rubber, but latex gloves. But still, it's still a decent enough movie. It's entertaining. You've got likable enough characters, especially Spike. And when the horror is there, it's not scary, but it's fun. And I think that's kind of what Englund and Hedgeland and other people are trying to go for. I don't think they were really trying to be scary here. Or maybe they were at times, but it just didn't pan out. But I think what they were trying to do is create a fun vibe and a fun horror movie. And I think, for the most part, they did succeed when it comes to that. Even though there are some clunky aspects of the film when it comes to the writing or the climax or some of the visual effects. But I've seen a hell of a lot worse. And I definitely feel that it's better than a lot of critics make it out to be. Because this has gotten a lot of negative reviews. I know when it came out, it got a lot of bad reviews. And I don't think it's that bad of a movie. It's entertaining. I wouldn't call it one of my favorites, but I would still like to upgrade this DVD to a Blu-ray sometime because the Blu-ray has features. I know the US release is out of print, but I like to get the Eureka release anyway because it has exclusive features and interviews that are not on the out-of-print American release. And the DVD, it's just bare bones and full screen. So yeah, I definitely want to upgrade to a Blu-ray one of these days. But anyway, I don't really know what else to say about 976 Evil, except thanks for watching my review. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.